The 8th of December 1941, a date that would reshape naval warfare forever, dawned with deceptive calm over Pearl Harbor, though across the Pacific, a brilliant but reckless commander was already contemplating a tactic so dangerous his own superiors had expressly forbidden it. Captain Tamechi Hara stood on the bridge of the destroyer Amatsukaze, watching the Hawaiian coastline recede into morning mist. Around him, the Imperial Japanese Navy celebrated their stunning victory, but Hara felt only gnawing unease. He had witnessed something during the attack that troubled him deeply. American destroyers, though caught by surprise, had responded with surprising ferocity in those final chaotic minutes. Their anti-aircraft fire, once coordinated, proved devastatingly effective. Hara was no ordinary naval officer. At 42 years old, he had spent 2 decades studying destroyer tactics with an intensity that bordered on obsession. His cabin overboard with technical manuals, sketches of attack formations, and translated American naval doctrine. While other commanders relied on traditional naval engagement rules, maintaining safe distances, executing textbook maneuvers, Hara had developed theories that horrified the Naval General Staff. According to historical records preserved in the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force archives, Hara had submitted a tactical proposal in 1939 that recommended destroyers engage enemy vessels at what he called throat-cutting range, distances so close that neither ship could effectively maneuver or disengage. The proposal had been immediately classified and suppressed. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto himself had summoned Hara to Tokyo, telling him bluntly that such tactics were suicidal romanticism that would waste valuable ships and trained crews. But Hara had not abandoned his theories. He had refined them. The forbidden tactic centered on a radical concept. Rather than treating destroyers as support vessels or submarine hunters, Hara envisioned them as precision assassins. His method required approaching enemy warships, even heavy cruisers and battleships, at maximum speed under cover of darkness or weather, closing to within 2,000 yards before unleashing concentrated torpedo spreads and naval gunfire simultaneously. The key was psychological as much as tactical. At such close range, enemy commanders would panic, their larger ships' advantages in armor and firepower negated by inability to bring guns to bear on such a close, fast-moving target. The Naval General Staff had rejected this approach for obvious reasons. Destroyers were thin-skinned vessels, vulnerable to even secondary battery fire from capital ships. Closing to throat-cutting range meant accepting casualties that Japan, with its limited industrial capacity, could ill afford. Traditional doctrine emphasized preserving the fleet, engaging at optimal ranges, maintaining formations. Hara disagreed fundamentally. He believed the coming war would be decided not by battleship duels, but by speed, aggression, and the willingness to trade damage for killing blows. He had studied every destroyer action from the Great War, analyzed the Battle of Jutland, pored over reports from the Spanish Civil War. His conclusion was radical. Destroyers commanded by bold captains could sink anything. As Amatsukaze steamed westward that December morning, Hara made a decision that would define his career and revolutionize naval combat. He would not wait for permission. The next time he encountered American warships, he would prove his theory. Regulations be damned. His opportunity would come sooner than anyone expected, in waters that would run red with the blood of both empires. By early February 1942, the Pacific War had exploded into a maelstrom of violence that shocked even its architects. Japanese forces swept through Southeast Asia with stunning speed, but American naval forces were proving far more resilient than Tokyo had anticipated. Hara received his orders on the 14th of February, while Amatsukaze was docked at Truk Lagoon. The destroyer would join a strike force tasked with intercepting American supply convoys near the Solomon Islands. Intelligence suggested minimal escort, perhaps 2 destroyers, possibly a light cruiser. It was exactly the opportunity Hara had been waiting for. He spent that night with his officers, explaining the tactic he intended to employ. According to post-war interviews conducted by American naval historians and documented in Samuel Eliot Morrison's authoritative 15-volume History of United States Naval Operations in World War II, Hara's briefing was met with stunned silence. His executive officer, Lieutenant Commander Shiro Sato, finally spoke. "Captain, this violates every engagement protocol in our doctrine. If we fail, you will face court-martial." Hara's response was characteristically blunt. "If we fail, we will be dead. Courts-martial are for survivors." The strike force departed Truk on the 19th of February, 4 destroyers including a Matsukaze, with a light cruiser in support. They steamed southeast through increasingly rough seas, hunting for the American convoy that intelligence had pinpointed near Guadalcanal. Contact came at 0230 hours on the 21st of February. The Americans had been careless, running without proper blackout discipline. Hera's lookouts spotted them first. 4 cargo ships with 2 destroyers as escort, exactly as predicted. The American destroyers were of the Porter class, modern, well-armed, and commanded by experienced officers who had survived Pearl Harbor. The Japanese cruiser commander, Captain Mikio Hayakawa, signaled standard attack procedure: maintain range at 12,000 yards, use superior night optics to launch torpedoes, then withdraw before the Americans could effectively respond. Hara ignored the signal. Instead, a Matsukaze broke formation, accelerating to 35 knots and turning directly toward the American escorts. Sato gripped the rail, watching the range close with terrifying speed. 10,000 yards, 8,000, 6,000. The American destroyers had spotted them now, searchlights stabbing through darkness, main batteries traversing. 4,000 yards. The Americans opened fire. 5-inch shells screamed overhead, throwing up massive geysers as they bracketed a Matsukaze. Hara stood motionless, refusing to order evasive maneuvers. His crew watched him with something between awe and terror. 2,000 yards. Hara finally spoke. "All tubes fire, main battery, rapid fire on the lead destroyer. Helm, hard starboard, prepare for ram if necessary." What happened next entered naval legend. A Matsukaze's torpedoes, launched at point-blank range, struck the American destroyer USS Porter with catastrophic results. 3 hits along her port side broke the ship's back. Simultaneously, Hara's main battery, firing at nearly horizontal trajectory, raked Porter's bridge and superstructure with devastating accuracy. The second American destroyer, USS Patterson, attempted to maneuver away but found herself boxed in by the cargo ships she was protecting. Hara, already reversing course, brought a Matsukaze alongside at 1,500 yards. So close his crew could see American sailors' faces in the firelight. Another torpedo spread, another kill. The entire engagement lasted 7 minutes. 2 American destroyers lay sinking or dead in the water. Hara had suffered 14 casualties and moderate damage to a Matsukaze's forward section, but his ship remained combat-capable. The other Japanese commanders were stunned. Captain Hayakawa signaled, "A Matsukaze, explain your actions." Hara's reply was brief. "Killing the enemy. Request permission to pursue cargo vessels." Permission was granted, though reluctantly. By dawn, all 4 American cargo ships rested on the ocean floor. News of Hara's action reached Tokyo on the 24th of February, 1942, and the Naval General Staff's response was predictably explosive. Admiral Shigeyoshi Inoue demanded Hara's immediate relief of command, calling the engagement reckless piracy that endangered fleet cohesion. But Admiral Yamamoto, the man who had originally condemned Hara's tactics, surprised everyone by ordering a full tactical review instead. The review took place over 3 days at the combined fleet headquarters in Hashirajima. Hara presented his case with meticulous detail, using models and charts to demonstrate how close-range destroyer attacks exploited fundamental weaknesses in Allied naval doctrine. American and British cruisers and battleships, he argued, were designed for long-range gunnery duels. Their secondary batteries, while theoretically capable of close defense, lacked the training and fire control systems to track fast-moving targets at knife-fighting distance. According to declassified Japanese naval records examined by historian Jonathan Parshall in his work, Shattered Sword, Yamamoto listened to Hara's presentation with growing interest. The admiral was facing a strategic nightmare. Japan's initial victories were masking a fundamental problem of industrial capacity. America could build ships faster than Japan could sink them using conventional tactics. What Yamamoto needed was a force multiplier, a way to make each Japanese ship count for more. Hara's forbidden tactic might be exactly that. On the 28th of February, Yamamoto made his decision. Rather than court-martial Hara, he would authorize a limited experimental program. Hara would train a squadron of destroyers in his close combat methods, with the understanding that failure would end both the program and Hara's career. Hara received 4 destroyers for his squadron: Amatsukaze, Hatsukaze, Yukikaze, and Tokitsukaze. He was given 6 weeks to transform their crews into what he called wolfpack hunters. The training was brutal. Hara drilled his ships in night after night of exercises, practicing high-speed approach runs against target ships, teaching gun crews to fire at targets closer than their equipment was designed to handle, conditioning torpedo men to launch spreads in conditions that would make most commanders flee. The key to Hara's system was coordination and timing. His destroyers would approach in a loose formation, forcing enemy ships to divide their attention. The lead destroyer, always Amatsukaze, would draw fire while the others positioned for killing shots. Once torpedoes were away, all ships would engage with guns, targeting bridges and fire control positions to create chaos and prevent effective counter-battery fire. Lieutenant Commander Sato, who had initially opposed Hara's methods, became their most effective practitioner. He developed a technique for using searchlights offensively, blinding enemy gun directors at close range, while Hara's other ships remained dark. It was psychological warfare married to tactics, and it worked. By mid-April 1942, Hara's squadron was ready for deployment. Yamamoto sent them to the Coral Sea, where American naval forces were gathering for what would become one of the war's pivotal battles. Hara's orders were specific: find American destroyers and cruisers screening their carrier task forces. Sink them. Create gaps in the American defensive perimeter. The squadron departed Rabaul on the 28th of April. Hara stood on Amatsukaze's bridge, studying maps of the Coral Sea. Somewhere in those waters, American destroyers were steaming toward him, their commanders confident in their ships and training. They had never faced anything like Tamichi Hara. The opening engagement came on the 4th of May, 1942, under circumstances that seemed almost staged for dramatic effect. A sudden tropical squall reduced visibility to less than 1,000 yards, just as Hara's squadron encountered a group of American destroyers protecting a tanker convoy. What followed would be studied in naval academies for generations. The 4th of May, 1942, transformed from routine patrol into legendary combat within the span of 20 heartbeats. Commander Richard Evans of the USS Sims had been tracking Japanese radio traffic when the squall hit, turning afternoon into premature twilight. His 3 destroyer screen, Sims, Russell, and Walker, maintained formation around their tankers, confident that weather offered protection. They were catastrophically wrong. Hara had calculated everything with mathematical precision. Amatsukaze closed to 1,800 yards before firing, a range so close that torpedo tracks barely had time to arm before striking. 2 torpedoes hit Sims amidships. The destroyer, her back broken, began settling immediately. But Hara wasn't finished. His main battery opened fire at point-blank range, shells punching through Sims's thin armor like paper, targeting her bridge and engine spaces specifically. Evans, badly wounded but conscious, watched in horror as his ship died around him. But what happened next shocked him even more. Instead of finishing Sims, Amatsukaze veered away at full power, vanishing back into the squall. Evans assumed the Japanese commander was fleeing. He was wrong a 3rd time. Hara was repositioning for his next kill. Hatsukaze and Yukikaze, following their commander's choreography precisely, had already engaged Russell and Waka. The American destroyers, trying to respond to threats from multiple directions in near-zero visibility, found themselves fighting phantoms. Japanese destroyers would appear suddenly at murderously close range, fire torpedoes and guns in devastating coordinated salvos, then disappear before effective return fire could be organized. Lieutenant Commander Thomas Schock, commanding Walkie, managed to score hits on Yukikaze at 2,200 yards, but the damage was superficial. Yukikaze's response, guided by Sato's blinding searchlight technique, was precise and fatal. 3 torpedoes struck Walkie along her starboard side within seconds of each other. The destroyer rolled over and sank in less than 4 minutes. Russell fought with desperate courage. Her captain, Commander Henry Coyle, recognized Hara's tactic and attempted to counter it by charging directly at Amatsukaze, hoping to force a mutual kill. It nearly worked. The 2 destroyers passed within 800 yards of each other, exchanging fire at such close range that ricochets from near misses struck both ships. Russell managed to hit Amatsukaze's forward turret, killing 7 men and temporarily disabling the gun. But Tokitsukaze, the 4th destroyer in Hara's squadron, had been waiting for exactly this moment. She emerged from Russell's blind side at 1,500 yards and fired a full spread of torpedoes. 2 struck home. Russell, mortally wounded, continued fighting for another 6 minutes before her magazines exploded. The entire engagement lasted 19 minutes. 3 American destroyers lay destroyed or sinking. Hera's squadron had suffered moderate damage to Amatsukaze and light damage to Yukikaze, with total casualties of 31 men killed or wounded. The tankers, defenseless, were sunk at leisure over the next hour. But the true impact of the engagement went beyond ships and men destroyed. News of the battle spread through both navies with electric speed. American commanders began receiving reports of a new Japanese destroyer tactic, one that seemed to ignore every rational principle of naval warfare, yet produced devastating results. Admiral Chester Nimitz, commanding the Pacific Fleet from Pearl Harbor, read the survivor reports with growing concern. According to documents referenced in E.B. Potter's biography, Nimitz, the admiral called an emergency staff meeting on the 7th of May. "Gentlemen," he reportedly said, "we have a problem. The Japanese have found someone crazy enough to make suicide tactics work, and smart enough to survive them." The 12th of May, 1942, found Hara's squadron at Truk Lagoon for hasty repairs and replenishment. Amatsukaze's damaged turret was restored to operation, casualties were replaced with fresh crew, and ammunition stocks were replenished. But the atmosphere among Hara's officers was tense, and for good reason. They knew the Americans would adapt. More concerning were reports that Admiral William Halsey, commanding American carrier forces, had issued specific orders regarding Japanese destroyer threats. According to intercepted communications decoded by Japanese intelligence and later documented in the U.S. Naval Institute's proceedings, Halsey had told his destroyer captains, "If you encounter these bastards, don't try to outthink them. Mass your forces, call for air support immediately, and if you must engage, do it at maximum range with overwhelming firepower." It was sound advice. Hera read it with grim appreciation. The Americans were learning. His next test came sooner than expected. On the 19th of May, Combined Fleet Headquarters ordered Hara's squadron to escort a cruiser force toward Port Moresby. Intelligence suggested American destroyers were operating in the area, screening cargo ships bringing reinforcements to Allied positions in New Guinea. The force departed Rabaul on the 20th of May. This time, Hara commanded 5 destroyers, his original 4 plus the newly assigned Urakaze. The cruiser commander, Captain Masao Nishida aboard Furutaka, made clear his skepticism of Hara's methods. "We will engage at proper range," Nishida signaled. "Destroyers will maintain screening positions." Hara acknowledged, but privately resolved to ignore those orders if opportunity presented itself. That opportunity came on the morning of the 23rd of May, when Amatsukaze's radar, new equipment just installed, detected multiple surface contacts at 28,000 yards. The Americans had set a trap. What Hara didn't know was that he was facing Commander Charles Calhoun, a destroyer squadron commander, who had studied every available report on Hara's tactics. Calhoun commanded 6 destroyers: Anderson, Hammond, Morris, Hughes, Russell II, named for the destroyer Hara had sunk, and Walker II. He had positioned them in a wide semicircle, with clear fields of fire and strict orders to illuminate and engage any approaching Japanese ships at maximum range. But Hara had not survived this long by being predictable. Instead of withdrawing or charging directly into the American trap, he ordered something that shocked even his own officers. He signaled his destroyers to stop engines and drift, presenting minimal silhouette. For 23 minutes, both forces remained motionless, commanders studying each other across 12,000 yards of Pacific water. It was Calhoun who blinked first. Concerned that Japanese submarines might be approaching, or that he was being drawn away from his convoy charges, he ordered his formation to tighten and begin withdrawing. The Americans responded with devastating firepower. Star shells burst overhead, turning night into day. 5-inch guns opened up at 9,000 yards, shells creating a steel curtain that seemed impossible to penetrate. Urakazi, caught in concentrated fire from Anderson and Hamann, took multiple hits and fell out of formation, dead in the water. But Hara pressed on. This was the moment his entire theory either proved itself or failed catastrophically. 23 minutes past midnight on the 24th of May, 1942, Amatsukaze entered what Hara had always called the dead zone, that terrible distance between 6,000 and 3,000 yards where enemy fire was most devastating, but his own weapons could not yet achieve maximum effect. Shells screamed past the bridge, so close that their passage created audible sonic cracks. One hit amidships, killing 4 men and starting a fire that his damage control teams fought desperately to contain. Sato, his executive officer, shouted above the chaos, "Captain, we cannot survive this, we must break off." Hara's response entered Japanese naval legend. According to testimonies collected by the U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey after the war, and referenced in Ronald Spector's Eagle Against the Sun, Hara calmly replied, "We do not break off, we break through." At 4,000 yards, Hara ordered a turn that defied sanity. Instead of presenting Amatsukaze's narrow bow profile to the American guns, he commanded hard starboard, exposing his destroyer's full-length broadside, offering American gunners the largest possible target. His officers stared in disbelief. But Hara had calculated precisely. By turning broadside at 4,000 yards, he could bring all his torpedo tubes to bear simultaneously. More critically, the maneuver would confuse American fire control solutions, which had been calculating trajectory for a ship approaching bow first. For perhaps 15 seconds, American gunners would need to recalculate firing solutions. 15 seconds was all Hara needed. "All tubes, fire!" 8 torpedoes leaped from Amatsukaze toward the American center, spreading in a fan pattern that covered 600 yards of ocean. Simultaneously, Hara's main batteries opened fire on the American destroyer Hughes, which had positioned herself as center guard for Calhoun's formation. The torpedoes struck with catastrophic precision. 2 hit Hughes, breaking her keel. 1 struck Morris in her forward magazine, detonating ammunition stored there and essentially vaporizing the ship's front third. The other 5 torpedoes missed, but they created a psychological effect as devastating as hits. Calhoun's formation scattered as individual captains took emergency evasive action, and scattered formations were exactly what Hera's wolf pack devoured. Yukikaze and Tokitsukaze, having swept wide during Hara's central assault, now struck from the American right flank. Their attack came from an unexpected angle, catching Anderson and Hamon, while they were maneuvering to avoid Hara's torpedoes. Yukikaze's commander, Lieutenant Commander Terauchi Masamichi, demonstrated he had learned Hara's lessons well. He closed to 2,200 yards, close enough that his lookouts could see American damage control parties fighting fires, and fired a carefully aimed spread that struck Anderson twice. But the Americans were not finished. Calhoun, aboard Walker 2, recognized that the Japanese attack pattern depended on coordination. If he could isolate individual destroyers, he could use his superior numbers to destroy them one by one. He signaled Morris and Russell II to concentrate fire on Hatsukaze, which had become separated from Amatsukaze during the initial assault. What followed was 4 minutes of the most intense destroyer combat of the Pacific War. Hatsukaze found herself taking fire from 2 directions, shells hitting with metronomic precision. Her captain, Commander Sugio Ohashi, attempted Hara's close approach tactic but lacked Hara's almost supernatural timing. At 3,800 yards, a 5-inch shell struck Hatsukaze's bridge, killing Ohashi and his senior officers instantly. The destroyer, suddenly leaderless, wallowed in the swell while American shells tore her apart. She sank at 01:15 hours, taking 243 men with her. Hara witnessed his squadron mate's destruction with cold fury. He had always known his tactics would produce casualties, but seeing it happen crystallized the terrible arithmetic of his warfare method. Exchange damage for killing power, trade blood for tactical advantage. Hatsukaze had died, but her sacrifice had allowed Yukikaze and Tokitsukaze to sink Anderson and cripple Hamon. The engagement was reaching its climax. 3 American destroyers were sunk or sinking: Hughes, Morris, and Anderson. Hamon was badly damaged and withdrawing, but Hara had lost Hatsukaze and Urakaze, with Amatsukaze herself taking serious damage that reduced her speed to 28 knots. Calhoun faced a decision. He had 3 destroyers still combat-capable: Walker 2, Russell II, and the damaged Hamon. His primary mission was convoy protection, but the Japanese force was still threatening his charges. If he withdrew now, he abandoned the tactical initiative. If he continued fighting, he risked losing his remaining ships. 01:30 hours on the 24th of May brought a moment of terrible clarity to both commanders. Calhoun, studying damage reports from his remaining ships, realized that continuing the engagement would likely result in mutual destruction. Hara, watching Amatsukaze's damage control parties struggle to contain fires spreading through his ship's midsection, understood that his destroyer could not survive another sustained exchange. The 2 forces disengaged by unspoken mutual consent, each withdrawing into the darkness while maintaining defensive formations. But the battle's conclusion was merely prelude to its consequences, which would reshape Pacific naval warfare. American casualties from the engagement totaled over 800 men killed or missing, with 3 destroyers sunk and 2 heavily damaged. Japanese losses were proportionally similar. 2 destroyers sunk, approximately 500 casualties, and Amatsukaze so badly damaged she would need 3 months of repair. More significantly, both navies drew dramatically different conclusions from the battle. Admiral Nimitz received Calhoun's after-action report on the 27th of May. According to Walter Lord's account in Incredible Victory, Nimitz studied the report for an hour before calling his staff together. "Gentlemen," he said, "we have just witnessed the evolution of destroyer tactics. This Japanese commander, whoever he is, has proven that destroyers can kill cruisers and other destroyers through sheer aggression and close-range tactics. We must assume he will train others in these methods." Nimitz's response was characteristically practical. He ordered immediate changes to American destroyer doctrine, enhanced radar equipment to detect approaching ships earlier, new star shell protocols to illuminate contact zones immediately, and most importantly, revised tactical guidance that emphasized concentration of force. American destroyers would no longer operate in small groups, but would mass their numbers to achieve overwhelming firepower advantages. The Japanese reaction was more complicated. When Hara's squadron limped back to Truk Lagoon on the 30th of May, he was immediately summoned to Tokyo to brief Combined Fleet Headquarters. The briefing, held on the 8th of June 1942, became legendary within Japanese naval circles. Admiral Yamamoto opened the meeting by acknowledging Hara's tactical success. 6 American destroyers sunk or damaged in 2 engagements against equal or superior numbers. But then Yamamoto asked the question that would define the rest of Japan's naval war. "Captain Hara, can your tactics scale? Can we train 50 commanders to fight like you? 100. Hara's answer, preserved in Japanese naval archives examined by historian H.P. Wilmot, was brutally honest. "No, Admiral. My tactics require specific conditions. Darkness or poor visibility, commanders willing to accept heavy casualties, and crews trained to function under conditions most men would consider suicidal. More importantly, these tactics become less effective as the enemy adapts. The Americans are already changing their doctrine to counter close-range attacks." Yamamoto pressed him. "Then what do you recommend?" Hara replied, "We must accept that tactical innovation provides only temporary advantage. The Americans have superior industrial capacity. They will build faster than we can sink. My tactics can delay their advance, but they cannot change the war's fundamental mathematics." The room fell silent. Hara had articulated what many officers suspected, but none dared say. Japan could not win a protracted war against America's industrial might. Tactical brilliance could achieve victories, but strategy demanded resources Japan did not possess. Despite this sobering assessment, Yamamoto authorized expansion of Hara's program. Over the next 6 months, 20 destroyer captains received training in close combat tactics. But the program's results were mixed. Only 3 commanders, Lieutenant Commander Masamichi Terauchi of Yukikaze, Commander Naoyoshi Tamura of Tokitsukaze, and Commander Kiyoshi Tanaka of Shimakaze, demonstrated genuine aptitude for Hara's methods. The problem, as Hara had predicted, was not just technical training but psychological conditioning. His tactics required what he called controlled fatalism, the ability to accept near-certain death while maintaining rational tactical judgment. Most commanders, no matter how brave, could not function effectively under such pressure. Meanwhile, American forces adapted with remarkable speed. By August 1942, American destroyer squadrons had implemented new tactical protocols that significantly reduced the effectiveness of close-range attacks. They operated in larger groups, maintained better radar watch, and concentrated fire more effectively. The brief window when Hara's tactics provided overwhelming advantage was closing. Hara understood this perfectly. In September 1942, he requested reassignment to shore duty, arguing that his methods had been studied and countered, and that he could better serve by training others than by continuing combat operations. Yamamoto denied the request. "You created this doctrine," Yamamoto told him. "You must perfect it." The 14th of November, 1942, marked Tamechi Hara's final engagement, using his forbidden tactics, and it demonstrated both their ultimate potential and fundamental limitations. The battle occurred in Iron Bottom Sound, near Guadalcanal, where American and Japanese forces had been locked in a grinding attrition campaign for months. Hara commanded 3 destroyers, Amatsukaze, Yukikaze, and the newly assigned Shimakaze, tasked with intercepting American reinforcement convoys. Intelligence indicated 4 American destroyers screening cargo ships, Fletcher, O'Bannon, Chevalier, and Lavalette, all modern vessels commanded by experienced officers, fully briefed on Japanese close combat tactics. The engagement began at 0200 hours, with both forces detecting each other simultaneously at 15,000 yards. What followed was not the explosive close-range melee that characterized Hara's earlier victories, but rather a cautious, methodical battle that demonstrated how thoroughly the Americans had learned. The American commander, Captain Robert Briscoe aboard Fletcher, implemented the counter-tactics that Nimitz's staff had developed specifically to neutralize close-range attacks. His destroyers maintained tight formation, illuminated the contact zone with star shells immediately, and opened fire at maximum effective range. When Hara attempted his signature high-speed approach, he found himself facing coordinated fire from 4 ships that maintained mutually supporting positions. Hara recognized the tactical stalemate instantly. The Americans had effectively negated his advantages. Numerical concentration countered his speed and maneuverability. Constant illumination eliminated surprise. Maximum range engagement prevented him from closing to throat-cutting distance. He had 3 choices: withdraw, accept heavy casualties attempting to force close engagement, or adapt. He chose adaptation. Rather than charging directly into American guns, Hara ordered his destroyers to conduct a fighting withdrawal, firing torpedoes at extreme range while maintaining speed and using darkness at the illumination zone's edge. The tactic was far less aggressive than his trademark close assault, but also far less risky. Over the next 43 minutes, the 2 forces exchanged fire at ranges between 8,000 and 12,000 yards, classic destroyer gunnery duels of exactly the type Hara's tactics had been designed to avoid. The engagement ended inconclusively. Both sides suffered damage but no sinking. Hara's destroyers withdrew to Rabaul, having failed to reach the American convoy. Briscoe's force successfully protected their charges. By traditional metrics, the Americans had won. But the engagement's true significance lay in what it revealed. Hara's forbidden tactics, while revolutionary, had been successfully countered through systematic adaptation. The Americans had studied, learned, and developed effective responses. Naval warfare's eternal dialectic, innovation countered by adaptation, had reasserted itself. According to detailed accounts referenced in James Hornfisher's Neptune's Inferno, Hara submitted his final tactical report on the 20th of November, 1942. In it, he acknowledged that his methods had achieved their maximum effectiveness, and that continuing to employ them would result in unsustainable casualties for diminishing returns. He recommended Japanese destroyers return to more conventional tactics, albeit incorporating elements of aggressive close-range engagement when conditions favored it. Admiral Yamamoto, reading the report, recognized its implications. The brief period when tactical innovation could offset strategic disadvantages was ending. American industrial production was beginning to overwhelm Japanese forces through sheer numbers. Yamamoto approved Hara's recommendations and, finally, granted his request for reassignment to training duties. Hara survived the war, one of few destroyer commanders from either side to do so. He spent 1943 through 1945 training new destroyer crews, though the ships and resources available to Japan dwindled steadily. After Japan's surrender, American naval intelligence officers interviewed him extensively. Those interviews, now preserved at the Naval War College, revealed a man who understood perfectly that his tactical innovations, while brilliant, could not overcome strategic realities. In retrospect, Hara's forbidden tactics represented both the potential and limitations of tactical innovation in modern warfare. He had proven that aggressive, unconventional approaches could achieve remarkable results against unprepared opponents. His close-range attacks sank 11 American destroyers and damaged 16 more during his brief combat command, an extraordinary record. But he had also demonstrated that tactical advantages are temporary. Competent enemies study, adapt, and develop countermeasures. The ultimate destroyer killer was not Hara's tactics, but rather America's industrial capacity to build faster than Japan could sink. Tamechi Hara died in 1986 at age 87, having written a memoir titled Japanese Destroyer Captain that provided invaluable insights into Pacific naval warfare. His legacy endured in naval academies worldwide, where his tactics are studied as examples of innovative thinking within rigid military structures. The man who defied orders to develop forbidden tactics had, paradoxically, vindicated both the value of tactical creativity and the wisdom of strategic caution.